125,000.
Coming up, he helped bring Rent to Broadway. Launched Hamilton into history. Legendary producer Jeffrey Seller is here. Then, Vincent Allen, theater All the Moving Parts intern and CUNY TV student, breaks down how to see Broadway in 2025 without breaking the bank. Hello, I'm Patrick Pacheco. Welcome to Theater All the Moving Parts. What a season it's been. The 2024-25 Broadway season was the highest grossing in history, with more than 13 million people attending shows. But with record-breaking success comes rising ticket prices, and for many, getting in the door has never felt more out of reach. Later in the show, we'll hear from Vincent Allen about how to score affordable tickets, including one of the most impactful tools for access, the Broadway Rush Ticket. And it all started with our next guest.
And the 50th anniversary Tony Award for Best New Musical goes to Rent.
Thank you, every single member of the Rent company who brings to life this enormous musical 8 times a week.
In 1996, as a young producer of Rent, Jeffrey Seller and his co-producers launched a revolutionary idea: $20 front row seats, first come, first served. It wasn't just a marketing gimmick, it was a mission to democratize theater going. And in many ways, it worked. The Rush line became part of the Rent experience, helping to build a generation of Broadway fans, Rentheads, who are still showing up today. Since then, Seller has become one of the most influential producers in Broadway history. His shows, Rent, Avenue Q, In the Heights, and Hamilton, have collectively earned 22 Tony Awards and grossed over $4.7 billion globally. But his path to Broadway wasn't easy. In his new memoir, Theater Kid, Seller traces his journey from a turbulent childhood in Oak Park, Michigan, to the highest tiers of commercial theater. And now he's stepping into the spotlight to tell his own story. Welcome, Jeffrey, to Theater All the Moving Parts, and congratulations on a most engaging, compelling, and moving story of your life, Theater Kid.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I think if you did a word search through the book, amazing would come up a lot.
Yeah.
If you did a word search, the words money, sex, and ambition would come up a lot. And you recently said in the New York Times that money, sex, and ambition are your life. Were you being flippant, or is that true?
Well, I want to point out that I left out one important word, and that's love. And so if I am able to write this addendum, I will add love and then still insist that money, sex, and ambition and love have been my life.
Well, we'll get into the money, sex, and ambition in the course of our interview. But I recently read a New Yorker review of a memoir, and in it, the New Yorker writer said, people write memoirs for 2 reasons. 1, to invite the sympathy of the readership, and 2, to invite admiration from the readership. What do you think about that in terms of your memoir?
I did not write it for the admiration of the reader. And I disagree. I didn't write it for the sympathy of the reader. I wrote it to invite the reader in to a world in which, if they have ever felt outside, if they have ever felt disregarded or not part of a group, that this memoir, my specific story, would help them to feel like, oh, I'm not the only one. And in not being the only one, I can find my community too. And then, of course, I wrote it for theater kids of all ages and of all types. whether one loves the theater to participate in community theater, or one wants to have a career in the theater, or one is having a career in the theater. So I don't think either of those fall into sympathy or admiration. But of course, I think that New Yorker critic left out another reason anyone might write a memoir, and I think for me, it was catharsis. I wrote it for as my own process of asking the question, how did I get from there to here, and why am I here on this earth?
Speaking of there, of course, I found it very moving, and I found enormous sympathy for the little kid, Jeffrey Seller, growing up in Cardboard Village. Your father was a ne'er-do-well, literally worked as a clown, couldn't keep food on the table, was irascible due to an early accident, and there was an enormous sense of shame that you felt from the poverty of your childhood. What does shame do to a young person growing up in Cardboard Village?
It creates an enormous amount of internal pain, because anytime someone would say, do you live in the village? Which was the slang for, do you live in Cardboard Village? Mm-hmm. And if I can just explain for a minute, Oak Park, Michigan, this little suburb just north of Detroit, just north of 8 Mile, people know 8 Mile from Eminem's great movie, was for the most part a very middle-class suburb, and then it had this one poorer enclave. And the reason they called it Cardboard Village was because our houses were made of those tar shingles you'd see on the roof and not of bricks. And kids would say, you live in the village? And I was constantly in fear of being found out, or ashamed when I would have to admit it. And I think that it eats us. It makes my, I always wonder how many beats did I lose in my life because my heart was beating faster from the shame and embarrassment that came from that. And that's why I say catharsis, because when I went to sit down and start writing this book, there was only one way I could start the book, which was with those two words, which were the source of the greatest amount of shame.
And I would suppose that it also fires up deep ambition to get out of Cardboard Village and to make a mark.
Yes, it's hard for me to say that it's a direct correlation, but it is absolutely a powerful variable, because I had such pain and shame and embarrassment also fuel anger. And that anger I had was to get out. I can't use the F word, but of course that's what I felt. I need to get out of here. And I do believe that was an enormous amount of fuel for me.
And what does come through, nonetheless, is love. Your father may have been a ne'er-do-well, and he may have shamed you, and he was given to angry outbursts. And yet what does come through in your book is that he loves you. Did the little Jeffrey, at the time that he was so ashamed of his father, realize that he was also being loved?
Yes. I'm adopted. I was told by my mother and my father from the earliest age that I was the chosen child. I was treated as the angelic child who could do no wrong. And for all of the other chaos and conflict that was transpiring in my household, that my parents both adored me and loved me was always clear to me. And I never doubted that. And that's what was so painful.
But it also must have been a great foundation.
It was a great foundation, and then it caused me an enormous amount of guilt, because here I know how much my dad loves me, and yet I'm ashamed of him for being unsuccessful. And I'm ashamed of him for his gargantuan size and for not being graceful or handsome in a more traditional way, or the kind of guy who could fit in at nice business lunches. You know,
We always cast our parents.
you know what I mean? Because you want
in the
that
most
guy. You don't
idealistic
want
way.
like the schlub.
You early on got the seeds of what would become an extraordinarily successful producing career, obviously with Rent, Avenue Q, In the Heights, and Hamilton. And early on, you were, I think, at some point, very aggressive, even as a teenager. and you obviously arrive in New York really hungry, very ambitious, and you're working for Fran and Barry Weissler, obviously,
Yes.
who are enormously successful. And you meet Kevin McCullum through them. At one point, Fran says to you, "You're too aggressive."
Has anyone ever told you you're too aggressive?
If they did, I'd be a very successful producer right now.
Yes.
What did you learn from Barry and Fran?
Well, Barry and Fran.
We should say that they produced Chicago, obviously, among many, many others.
Yes, Barry and Fran Weissler, who are the producers of Chicago, of Real Women Have Curves this season, of Waitress the same year we did Hamilton 10 years ago. But back in the 80s, they were creating musicals, or I should say musical revivals with big stars. And they really created that whole system. And that system was geared toward serving the subscribers all over the country. Zorba with Anthony Quinn, Cabaret starring Joel Grey, Robert Goulet in South Pacific. But what they were doing that was so unique is they were producing, general managing, and booking all in-house. So they were controlling all of the levers of production. And I watched them, I learned from them, and when ultimately Kevin and I went off on our own.
We're talking now about Kevin McCullum, obviously your co-producer for many years.
Yes.
Through 4 Tony Awards, 3 or 4 Tony Awards.
Tony Awards.
Of your musicals. You're very frank in your descriptions, and in fact, very, very adept in how you describe people throughout this book.
Thank you.
Kind of describe Kevin as being full of himself, always having sort of what he wants to say and say it forcefully. How did you go about kind of figuring out, okay, what can I write about this person? When can I censor? When should I censor myself?
I did very little censoring myself because the heart of, I think, all of those relationships was affection. And did they have conflict? Yes. Sometimes very deep conflict. Did they have disagreement? Of course. But Kevin and I did amazing things together. And the only way to write a good book is to tell a good story and, to the best of my ability and the best of my memory, because it's a memoir, show what happened. And that's what I did without censorship. And I want to say that was the case whether I was describing Kevin or Barry and Fran or anybody else in the book.
Or Alan Gordon, who does not come off that well, your co-producer on Rent,
I showed Alan Gordon for exactly who he was.
which is kind of a schmuck, I guess.
He was a Wall Street guy who came to Broadway because he was bored with his life, and he had some laughs. But he didn't really have respect for the artistic process of making musicals, and he didn't really have respect for most of the people on Broadway. And I told it like it was.
Where you get liftoff, you and Kevin.
And I just want to say, of all the characters you've just mentioned, he would be the only exception where it was not a relationship based on affection or mutual respect.
You get liftoff, obviously, when you meet Jonathan Larson in the book.
Yes.
And the chapter on Rent is an extraordinary compendium of how something becomes a phenomenon. And it's also one of the most poignant chapters in the entire book. What I found fascinating is that I think you go to a workshop or you hear Boho Days, which I think Boho Days was part of Tick Tick Boom.
Boho Days becomes Tick Tick Boom after I recommend to Jonathan he change the title to Tick Tick Boom. Yes.
Years are getting shorter, the lines on your face are getting longer. You feel like you're treading water, but a riptide's getting stronger.
And when you hear the song Boho Days, what goes through Jeffrey Sellers' mind?
Oh my gosh. Jonathan did the first iteration of Boho Days, which became Tick, Tick, Boom back in 1990. And it was all about his 30th birthday. And it was all about this notion that he kept hearing in his brain, tick, tick, boom. He thought he was going to explode. Why? Because he was a 30-year-old composer of rock musicals that nobody wanted to produce. Because he lived in a fourth-floor walk-up in which the bathtub really was in the kitchen, and all the roommates had to switch off on when you could go into the kitchen and have privacy to take a bath. He had to work at the Moondance Diner to make ends meet. And he was asking himself, like, why should I keep doing this when all I'm doing is hitting a wall over and over and over? And in the play, or the one-man play of Tick, Tick, Boom, he gets a job offer to be a copywriter. And he'll finally make a real living. And he doesn't have to be a waiter, and he can get a better apartment, and he can get health insurance, and maybe go on a vacation. And the question is, do I keep writing rock musicals that nobody wants to produce? Or do I stay true to what I love and my passion and my art and persevere, even though I'm hitting a wall every time I try? And as I'm watching this one-man show that's all being told through music, the hair on my arms is rising, and I'm like, he's telling my life story. I've never met this guy in my life, and yet I feel the same way, because I'm still a booker at Barry and Fran's office, and I don't want to be a booker anymore, and I don't like being a booker, and I want to be a producer, but how am I ever going to be a producer? I have no money. I don't know any rich people. There are no new musicals on Broadway, as you know, back in 1990. Sometimes as few as 2 if you go to the year of Jerome Robbins' Broadway and Starmites. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And Black and Blue. No musicals, no money. I'm never going to be a producer. And I had just broken up from a 6-year relationship, so I thought, oh, I'm going to be lonely for the rest of my life. And I was as much in despair as a 25-year-old can be. And Jonathan was telling my story in a vernacular that felt meaningful to me, which was pop music, rock music, and contemporary music.
And you gave him the best advice I think you can give any writer, which is follow your vision. Do your thing. You say it in a pretty rough way. In the book, there's a very compelling moment at some burger joint with Jonathan Larson in which you give him some bad news. Can you kind of tell us about that?
Yeah, that was our first meeting after the very first ever reading of Rent. This was in, I think, the spring of '93, and he invites me, and I go down there with so much excitement. In fact, I bring with me this guy I've recently met who is an Australian producer in his 20s. And he's very engaging, and I happen to know that he's from a wildly wealthy family from Australia. So I'm thinking in the back of my mind, hey, if I can get him to like it, maybe he'll join me and he can put up the money. He leaves an intermission.
That sign.
You know, that very nice Australian, oh, I didn't know it would be this long. But you know what he's really saying is, I gotta get out of here as soon as possible. And then I'm with another guy who says after the whole thing's over, well, Jonathan's very talented, but he just needs to go write something else. Mm-hmm. And I'm deflated, but I believe. I believe it's there. And Jonathan and I go out to Diane's Hamburgers, and he's like, so what did you think? And this is that moment where a producer has to decide, how do I balance praise and encouragement with truth and criticism? So I took a breath and I said that opening number was a wallop. And that was Rent. He had the right opening number. And I said, the music is terrific. But then I said, but I don't understand the story. I'm not getting the plot. I can't follow the characters. And I can't tell if you're do you want to write just like a collage of life in the East Village? Or do you want to write a play? And he took umbrage at that and was like, no, I want to write a play. I want to write a musical. I said, well, then you have to tell the story. Because right now it's not coming through and the characters are not coming through. So I'm lost.
And he's vulnerable and he's indignant.
He's not happy. And he's like, well, I'm going to do this. And I said, yes, please do. I need you to.
What's fascinating in the development in which you recount the development of Rent is everybody sort of thinks that as you move along, it becomes better and better and better. Oh. You describe a situation in which there's another development step and he goes backwards, that it gets worse.
This is a classic 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because then if you jump from that first reading that I would have to say was not successful, he does a workshop in which Michael Greif has now joined him as the director a year and a half later. And that's the workshop in which I bring my business partner, Kevin McCollum. Mm-hmm. And the moment Mimi knocks on that door, knock, 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 and we hear Mimi meet Roger with "Will you light my candle?" we know we are in the presence of brilliance and this incredible rock duet that is revealing both plot and character and soul, and it's unbelievable. It's amazing. And that's the moment Kevin becomes obsessed with Rent.
I didn't recognize you without the handcuffs.
We could light the candle. Oh, won't you light the candle?
And our drive to do it. But that's a very successful workshop. And then, frankly, a little less than a year later, he's done a whole bunch of changes. And then we do yet another reading upstairs in the rehearsal room for no audience. And it, in many ways, goes backwards. They start with Halloween, and the whole thing becomes a series of flashbacks. And Mimi seems to be a righteous proselytizer of No Day But Today in one scene, and then she's a heroin addict in the next scene, and she just seems to flop back and forth between heroin addict and righteous do-gooder. And there's this new song for Joanne and Maureen that is, I can't even say the words here. It was called "You Are the Hepatitis in My Clam." That's what it was.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And you've got to give him bad news. It's
then now we're like, what are we going to do? Because this was only really 6 weeks before rehearsal.
For the New York Theater Workshop production?
for the real production. It is
Wow.
6 weeks before rehearsal. And here we are again. And we seem to have lurched backward from the last workshop. And this time, instead of, I write a 3-page letter, some of which is in the book, to Jim Nicola.
Mm-hmm. The artistic director.
The artistic director of New York Theater Workshop. And Jim reads the letter and hands it to Jonathan. And Jonathan, and it's a crisis for that week because the question becomes, do we postpone? But if we do, Michael Greif will have to leave the show because he has a job now as the artistic director at the La Jolla Playhouse. So Michael can't really postpone. Or if he does, it's going to be a year. Jonathan has already planned to quit his job at the Moondance Diner, so he feels like it's the end of the world. And of course, what comes out of that is he goes to his mentor, Stephen Sondheim, and asks for advice. And Sondheim says, "You're in the theater, you have to collaborate."
Amazing story. And you mentioned Michael Greif, and it's one of the reasons why your memoir is a worthy successor of Moss Hart's Act One and other great books about the theater. And that is in your description of characters. And Michael Greif is one of them, the director, obviously, of Rent.
Yes.
You describe him as intimidating and cool with a subversive layer of sarcasm, which is exactly the way I know him to be. I'm always a little bit afraid he's going to snap at me. But that was just part of this process of Rent. And obviously, and again, everybody thinks it kind of just, sort of popped up as this phenomenon, but it wasn't. Even when you're getting ready to open at New York Theater Workshop, and either you or Kevin says, this is a disaster. This is not going to work. This is the worst. You're close to opening. And the very well-told story, and it's been often documented, of course, is the extraordinarily poignancy of Jonathan Larson dying of an aortic aneurysm on the morning of the first preview, just after having given an interview to the New York Times. He has arrived at a place that he's always wanted to be. This is so well documented. What did you feel you had to say about that story that had not been already told?
I think I was trying to tell that story from the deep inside of what it felt like. Well, from me. You know, at the end of the day, I could only tell that story again through the lens of what it felt like to be this 31-year-old producer of Rent. This man who had created this incredible business friendship, this artistic friendship with Jonathan over these 6 years, and what it was like to tragically lose him in a profound way that was also eerie, because somehow you can't listen to one song, Glory, one song, Before I Go.
Before I go, glory, one song to leave behind. Find one song, one last refrain, glory, from the pretty boy front man who wasted opportunity.
Without wondering, how did he manage to write a musical about his life, his friends, and his own death? And I don't think that anyone had ever gotten into the details of how all of us negotiated through the minutes and the hours and the days after he died through the opening.
You also say in the book that you're guilt-ridden about his death in many respects, and I think that everybody is, that somehow he could not reap the fruits of his labors. But that the redemptive part of that story was what came in the aftermath in terms of influence, the way he influenced the theater. Was that enough?
Who is to say what is enough for our 80, 90, or in Jonathan's case, 35 years on this earth? But here's the truth. There is no Avenue Q without Rent. There is no In the Heights. Lin comes to see Rent as a high school senior with his girlfriend and sits in the balcony and sees all those characters on that stage and says, oh, I can write a musical about my community, my family, my friends with our music. And that leads to In the Heights. And In the Heights leads to Hamilton. And I'm leaving out shows that I didn't do. Well, two other Michael Greif shows, like Next to Normal and Dear Evan Hansen. All of these shows are sitting on the shoulders of Jonathan Larson, because Jonathan had a mission. I want to write musicals about our characters, our stories, with our music. And on that level, he succeeded in a way that I don't think he ever could have imagined.
Does it ultimately just, is this just a moment when life sucks? Yes, he may have influenced the thing, whatever came in its aftermath, but ultimately, is it just life sucks when something like this happens?
Well,
to quote Avenue Q.
No question about it, but I also leave out, how many lives did he save? And by that I mean, how many kids were considering suicide because they felt other, because they were gay, lesbian, trans, and they felt isolated. And in Rent, listening to Rent, watching Rent, going to Rent, doing parties with their friends, they found community, and they found ways to celebrate their lives and not go in other more negative directions. I know this to be true. How many kids did he save who went and got tested for HIV? Because we know, I've read more than one dissertation on the correlation between greater numbers of kids getting tested for HIV as a result of principally three things, which were Rent, Angels in America, and the AIDS quilt. So he had an enormous impact. And look what he gave us. He gave us the contemporary Broadway theater.
What comes along then is Avenue Q. And what I found fascinating about the Avenue Q chapter is that you talked a lot about, obviously, the marketing, not to mention the Tony campaign. But what was fascinating is that you did say what's important is to get 50,000 people to like your musical in the first month or whatever.
It would take 10 weeks to do that.
Because
forget about 8 to 10 weeks, yeah.
Advertising, forget about marketing. Yes, it has its role, but word of mouth.
Yes.
How has word of mouth changed in this time, in this day and age? And also, yes, you can't shape word of mouth necessarily entirely through marketing. What is the role of all these influencers that are now rampant over the internet?
I think that my basic hypothesis that once you get 50,000 people in to see your show, your future is set. Like, it's either going to go or it's not. Obviously, we as producers and marketers can influence that to some degree, but if 50,000 people come and you're not selling tickets, you're dead. And there is nothing you are going to do to change it. And if 50,000 people come to see that show and they are over the moon, that will create the next 250,000 people in no time at all. And Avenue Q is a good example of that. Very slow burn. And
like maybe Happy Ending this season.
Very slow burn, but continuing to expand its audience. Absolute great example. I love what's happening at the Belasco with maybe Happy Ending and its slow burn word of mouth. And then you look at a bonfire like Book of Mormon. I mean, they start with very low advance and it just catapults to mega success in the course of weeks. Because as soon as Book of Mormon starts performing, and I had nothing to do with it other than admiration, it goes through the roof. And it was word of mouth. It was word of mouth. People loved that show, and those tenets are still true. However, these influencers and social media, they are now a very potent pillar of our advertising campaign. What it means is no one's taking ads in the print version of the New York Times anymore. No one, well, people are, but the efficacy of taking ads on the Today Show and Good Morning America is so low in comparison to the kinds of communications we can make through social media. So I like it. I think it's a good tool, but it doesn't replace what will always be the case, which is word of mouth. And that was true when My Fair Lady opened.
And it's true today.
And it's true today.
You mentioned in the book that you go to a reading or whatever else, a workshop, and you're looking for two things. One, an element of surprise, and two, a sound that perhaps you've never heard before on Broadway.
Yes, sir.
And that was true with that kid in the balcony looking at Rent, Lin-Manuel Miranda, coming out of Wesleyan, I think, where
correct.
he had really worked on In the Heights at the time with Tommy Kail, and that group that would eventually go on to do Hamilton. In terms of the sound that you heard, and especially the culture that it celebrated, the Latino culture of Washington Heights, what went through your head as you heard those opening strains?
When Lynn came out in the first reading I saw of In the Heights and started that rap, lights up on Washington Heights up at the break of day.
Lights up on Washington Heights up at the break of day. I wake up and I got this little punk I gotta chase away. Pop the grade at the crack of dawn, sing while I wipe down the awning. Hey, y'all,
there was something warm. I felt like I was like in the Caribbean Sea being embraced by that warm water. It was welcoming. It was laced with like oranges and yellows from the sun. And I leaned in. And then when this Broadway chorus comes up behind him with their song, "In the Heights, I Wake Up and Start My Day," in a very traditional Broadway choral line, I'm like overwhelmed because I've never heard rap married to Broadway choral music before. And what does it do? It makes the hair on my arm stand up like when I first heard Jonathan's Boho Days. And so A, it was a surprise, but B, I went, oh, I've never heard a Broadway musical sound like that. And that's what I felt when Mimi came in and said, knock, 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 and said, will you light my candle? And that's what I found in a different way, because it was lyrically driven, when Nikki sang to Rod, if you were gay, that'd be okay. I mean, 'cause hey, I'd like you anyway.
Hey, I'd like you anyway.
And I fell off my chair laughing because it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard, that a puppet was singing that to another puppet. So melody, familiar, but lyric, complete surprise. And that's what I heard when they started that beautiful opening number of In the Heights.
And there's also a specificity of culture in the song Paciencia y Fe.
Oh,
Right? I mean,
well, I considered it the best aria I'd ever heard in the theater.
the old lady in a house dress comes out, the grandma, I
The
believe.
grandma who moves to New York as like a 6-year-old with her mother, and Lynn is describing what it feels like to be a little girl in New York City who's never experienced cold and snow before.
Paciencia y fe. Paciencia y fe. Paciencia y fe. Fresh off the boat in America, freezing in early December, a crowded city in 1943.
She's coming from Puerto Rico.
She's coming from Havana. You know, we have Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and Cubanos in the Heights. But Claudia Abuela moved from Havana, and as this incredible actress sings this aria about her life in New York, and gets to this moment where she sings, polishing with pride the whole of the Upper East Side. She has become a housekeeper, and it has made her journey in the United States. I cried, and I'm moved now because first of all, I have no idea how Lynn, who was like 25, could write that song about the experience of a 70-something-year-old woman, and I suppose I must have thought about my own family.
You went on to co-produce with Kevin McCullum In the Heights, and then just before Hamilton, you dissolved the partnership.
Yes, sir.
Why did you separate from Kevin at that point?
I was in my late 40s. I think I was maybe 47, 48. And I realized I was about the halfway point in my career. And I made a very personal decision that I wanted to be the sole decision maker of my business. That after 20 great years riding a bicycle in tandem, I wanted to ride solo. And I was aware that that would have positives and negatives and wins and losses. And I thought, I want to win or lose, but know that I was responsible for making those decisions.
How did he respond?
He was sad. We love each other. And, Kevin and I have very different backgrounds with some amazing similarities. Thematically, but not narratively. Like his narrative is very unique and my narrative is unique. But we do have a lot of similarities, and we are like brothers. So it was a painful breakup, but it, for me, was a existential question of what do you want to achieve in your life?
St. Teresa of Avila once said that there are more tears shed over answered prayers than unanswered prayers. Your life has been full of answered prayers. Shed a lot of tears about those?
That sounds so Catholic, and I'm Jewish. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it.
Well, forget about Teresa of Avila. I think the Greeks said it as well about hubris. There's another version of that.
So are you asking about regrets?
I'm asking, yes, and I'm also asking about how tremendous success. You've won, what, 4 Tony Awards, 4
Yeah.
Tony Awards. You're very rich, obviously. You have no financial worries. You can do whatever you want. You're powerful. These are all answered prayers, or what somebody from the outside looking in on and reading your book is thinking, wow, I wish I could be Jeffrey Seller.
Yeah, but
It kind of disabuse them of just how great it is if it isn't as great as we think it is from the outside.
you know what's great? Last night, I don't know when this is going to play, but anyway, last night was the Tony Awards, and Hamilton performed, and it was an amazing number. And I was home, and my daughter was home, and she had 5 friends over, and they were eating pizza and watching the Tonys, and I had about 6 or 7 friends over, and my new love, Yuval Sharon, and we ate dinner, and we had dessert, and watched the show in our living room. And that's the group, and that's the family that I have always yearned for. And hopefully that comes through as well, that this is a book about a kid who has a lot of shame and embarrassment, who wants to find his own group, and ultimately does through the power of theater. But and it's a book about a kid who likes making things and has been able to have the privilege and or the honor. Honor's like I think we overuse honor, but was lucky enough, because there's luck. Hal Prince always said luck is so important, and was lucky enough to make these musicals that have enriched people's lives.
What keeps you humble?
I'm a frail human who's going to die like everybody else, and I have to wake up and go to the bathroom and do my 8 minutes of exercises and go try to figure out how to live my day. There's that Avenue Q line, you're just not that special.
One of the things that you said in the book, or wrote in the book, excuse me, is that whenever you encourage writers to pursue what they want to write, your success stems from that. Your failures stem when it's your idea.
You know what?
And you bring up
Yeah.
Sting's The Ship.
Actually,
as an
well,
example.
the Sting Last Ship was not my idea. That was his idea, and I was fully behind it. I absolutely loved the idea. It was an idea based on an article that was on the front page of the New York Times, actually. And it was a story about a Polish priest who brings together all of the unemployed and dispossessed steel workers, ship workers, auto workers who have no jobs, and he brings them to an old ship-making facility, and they start building a ship in which they plan to sail around the world. And this was a true story in Gdansk, Poland, that the New York Times reported, and Sting was inspired by it. So that musical, which I developed almost simultaneously with Hamilton. So I'm like, on one day, these days I'm with Sting in that group, and those days I'm with Lynn and Tommy in that group. I believed in fervently. And when the first 50,000 people came, they didn't like it enough, and we did not succeed. And that's painful. But I will also say to you that all 4 of my musicals that became best musicals and big hits were all the idea, and the motivator was the writer.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, obviously, early in this interview about seasons in which there were maybe 2 musicals. We've just come off of an extremely successful,
You bet.
both artistically and commercially. What are the challenges now facing Broadway, in your opinion?
You know, Broadway suffers from this financial problem that is built in called cost disease. And what cost, and this was made, Stephen Dubner talks about this on his Freakonomics podcast. Cost disease is that we are so labor intensive on Broadway with actors, musicians, stagehands, front of house staff, that we can never achieve technological efficiency. Okay? When flat screen TVs came out, they were at one price, and they just kept going down and down and down. Same with computers, same with phones, right? We could make them cheaper and cheaper because they found ways with manufacturing to make these things cheaper. We can never do that on Broadway because if I'm doing Sweeney Todd, which I did 2 years ago, I have 30 people on stage, I have 26 people in the pit, I have another 50 people, or maybe a little bit less. Well, between costumes and all the stagehands doing that. And so our biggest enemy is still cost. And the costs went up yet again after COVID. And this has been a fantastic season, as you say. 13 musicals, all eligible for Best Musical.
14, I think.
14, yeah, so I'm down by one. And I don't remember how many plays, but last night,
14.
14 plays, and the 5 last night, all amazing contenders, 3 of which are running and doing amazing business right now. So I think this has been a great season in so many ways. Here's what Broadway suffers from. The costs are so high, none of the producers are making any money. The shows that are making money are still basically the big 3 pillars, Hamilton, Lion King, and Wicked. To some degree, maybe MJ, but not a lot of shows that are actually churning the kinds of profits that we can feed back into the system. So I think that's a problem. And I think at some point it may put a crimp on our ability to raise money for more because the investors have not seen any big gains from any of these new shows over the last few years.
Quick PS, your revival of Sweeney Todd was terrific. It got great reviews. It did very well.
And it recouped.
It did recoup.
And
That was
it was a
that's
hit.
where I was. That's where I was going to go.
And we made a 25% profit.
I'm amazed. I mean, really, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We have to wrap up, but in the movie and/or play that's written about Theater Kid, who would play you?
Oh, come on.
And who would play your dad?
Well, you know, what I will say is that I made an audiobook. So I made my own, which was that when Simon & Schuster said we're going to do an audiobook, I was like, oh, no one wants to hear my voice for 8 hours. God, I don't, Lord knows. And I got this idea, why don't we do it like a staged reading, like we do for all of our plays? So I was able to go out and solicit and beg and ask and get 15 friends who are all some of the most amazing actors on Broadway to play all the different parts, and then I read me.
It's about staying true to yourself, pursuing your dreams, and not giving up and selling out. I need my life to be about me.
Come on, keep me company. It's only 2 papers.
You made an agreement, and you're the one trying to break it.
How are you with numbers? That's what everybody says.
So, for example, Danny Burstein reads my father, and all I could think of is, wouldn't it be great to have Danny's voice? Because Danny has of the most loving, gentle voices. And my father was often a tempestuous, screaming guy, but so filled with love. And I thought if we could get Danny to do that, how beautiful. And Lindsay Mendez played my mom, and Annalee Ashford's in it. And Lin-Manuel plays Barry Weissler, and Renee Goldsberry plays Fran Weissler. And
who plays Jonathan Larson?
Darren Criss, Tony Award winner for Best Actor, plays Jonathan Larson. So I had so much fun working with all of those actors.
And Lynn didn't play Lynn?
And Lynn played Lynn.
Lynn
was the only, he was the only character who played himself.
I want to wrap up with this question, and that was, at one point in the book, and I want to come back to Cardboard Village, where we started, And at one point in the book, you write a letter to your father in which you divorce him. You basically say, I never want to see you again. I never want to have anything to do with you. You are not my father. You're not worthy of my love or respect or admiration or anything else. You came around, in which you either forgave him, he was at your plays, your successes. What, in writing this book, and you mentioned catharsis, what came around in terms of your reconciliation with him? And, you know, Cardboard Village is sort of your Rosebud in the way that Rosebud is to Citizen Kane. And what did you learn about it in the process of writing this book? And about yourself, more importantly.
My appreciation for and love for my father grew in writing this book. When you brought up that letter, I cringed because that was a tough letter. And that was a tough letter from an angry 19-year-old. I think I was 20-year-old young man. And I think in so many ways, I wrote this book maybe to get closer to my father. And I felt it at the end. And, you know, as for Cardboard Village, I went back and I learned something when I went back. And I don't want to talk more about it because I want your viewers to go get the book. But Cardboard Village does teach me something in the end.
Well, we'll end on that note. Yes, go out and get this book. It's extraordinary.
Or the audio book. If you don't want to read, it's a good listen because you don't have to listen to me all the time. You get all the greatest actors on Broadway.
We'll leave on that note of forgiveness and mercy and generosity. And thank you so much for joining us.
Patrick, what a nice conversation. Thank you.
When we return, Theater All the Moving Parts intern Vincent Allen shows you how to see the best of New York theater without taking out a mortgage.
Hello, I'm Vincent Allen, and I'm currently a production intern at CUNY TV. I'm also an advertising and public relations major studying at City College, and I am in my senior year. Here at Theater All the Moving Parts, one of our goals is to educate and inform New Yorkers to make theater more accessible.
Sure, we bring it into your homes, but we also want to help you get out and experience theater in person.
Broadway had its highest grossing season ever this year, $1.8 billion, and that was propelled by the high individual ticket prices. In other words, people spent a lot of money. We all know Broadway can be expensive, but what a lot of people don't realize is that there are a number of programs, legit, easy to use, and even digital, that can get you into Broadway, off-Broadway, and off-Broadway shows for under $50. Let's start by breaking down some of the most common ways to get discounted tickets. General Rush, Student Rush, Standing Room, and digital lotteries. Today, we're using Playbill's Rush and Lottery Guide to help illustrate how these systems work because they list it show by show, and you can use that info to plan ahead. Just know these policies change all the time. That's why it's important to check trusted sources like Broadway World for up-to-date information. General Rush tickets are first come, first served, and are sold at the box office when it opens on the day of the show. They're available to anyone, but they do go fast, so if you want one, plan to arrive early. Student Rush works the same way, but it's only available to students with valid ID. Some shows may also offer faculty or military rush options, so it's always worth asking at the window. Standing room only, or SRO tickets, are just what they sound like. You'll be standing at the back of the theater. These are only offered when a performance is sold out. They're the cheapest option, usually $25 to $45, and you'll need to buy them in person, often with cash. Now, if waiting in line isn't your thing, digital lotteries might be your best bet. These are online entries for a chance to buy deeply discounted tickets, usually around $30 to $49. You enter on a show's lottery site like Lucky Seat, Broadway Direct, or Telecharge. If you win, you'll get an email or text and typically have an hour to purchase your tickets. So yes, you can really win a Broadway seat from your phone without standing in a line at all. If you're looking for even better discounts, I know a spot that's been helping New Yorkers for over 50 years. Actually, it's right behind me. You didn't think this was just a selfie spot, did you? The Theater Development Fund, or TDF, manages the iconic TKTS booth in Times Square, where you can score same-day tickets for up to 50% off. But TDF's membership program is really where the best deals are. I sat down with Andrew Block, who helps manage partnerships for TDF.
We really believe in making theater more accessible and easier for people to attend. So whether that be breaking down financial barriers or awareness, just simple awareness about what's out there, or mobility issues, we do everything we can to kind of break that sort of stigma of like theater is just for the elite and not for me. And we make sure that everybody has it at their fingertips.
Can you walk us through the membership programs?
Yes. So of all the programs we have, membership is our, I guess, biggest and most robust. It's just $42 an annual fee for the year, and that gets you access to really, really, really steep discounts to Broadway shows, off-Broadway shows, opera, theater, dance, indie theater, you name it. As an artist, you can be eligible, but we have categories for retirees, we have categories for freelancers, we have categories for anyone who works in the nonprofit sector, we have categories for arts professionals, we have categories anybody under 30, students, you name it.
Let's talk about price. So, how much do tickets typically cost through the TDF membership program, and how far in advance can people buy them?
So Broadway shows typically range from $51 up to $60. But everything that is off Broadway, and opera and dance and all of that stuff, those tickets start at 11. And check your TDF membership daily and often. We have some shows that have weeks of shows in advance, but sometimes we'll have things for that night that come out. Like certain hot shows, they may just give like a small allotment of something, but people can just go on there and grab them.
For perspective, in the run-up to this year's Tony Awards, all 5 shows represented in the Best Actress in a Musical category were at one point available to TDF members. Remarkable access to Broadway's top shows. So next time you think live performance is out of reach, think again. For Theater All the Moving Parts, I'm Vincent Allen.
And thank you for joining us. We look forward to bringing you more fascinating conversations with creative talents who live and work only to astonish us. Be sure to download the new CUNY TV app to watch all of our exciting and provocative shows, also available on YouTube. I'm Patrick Pacheco.